Oh, I got an alert from that's good. That's a good sign. All right.
That's a good sign.
Oh, can you hear that? Amazing, amazing. On in Bindigan. Welcome everybody to Homies Chatting. I'm Big Migs, aka DJ Indian, aka Magaze Bayboyad, aka Ian Compo.
And I'm Jesse Thistle, aka the Thistler, and I'm broadcasting here from overcast Hamilton. I wore my tropical shirt to bring some of that good weather here. Hopefully it works. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm broadcasting from the farm just outside of Ottawa. Behind me, I got the Peterborough petroglyphs known as the Kinomage Gamgong or the Kinomage Wabik. Kinomage Gamgong breaks down to be the learning rocks, or Wabik means metal or minerals. So the Kinomage Wabik is like the learning minerals. And that's what's behind me here. Yo, there's some like serious things. Like here's that's one of the creators. Up here, oh, hold on. There's Nanabush. I don't know if
Whoa, yeah, right there.
Yeah, with the rabbit ears. Yeah.
And we got a special guest here. You want to introduce him, Ian?
Yeah, we got Garth Mullins, who is an award-winning podcaster, an award-winning advocate, an award-winning broadcaster and writer. The incredible Garth Mullins. He's known for his frontline work on advocating for the rights of drug users and just the right to life, basically. And he's also the host, of the award-winning podcast Crackdown, which is one of the most important podcasts I've been keeping up with. It's a perspective and an understanding of the opioid epidemic from the perspective of drug users. And I think that is probably the most important perspective when we're discussing drug use. And it blew my mind how much I didn't know and how bad things were getting until I started listening to this podcast. And I'm sorry, I'm rambling on, but I'm so excited to invite Garth Mullins.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's really cool to be here. I'm a fan of both of your work, Ian and Jesse, and so it's nice to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. We're really excited to have you. I also wanted to mention that we have Kim Wheeler, our producer, hanging out in the background, and she's going to be taking note of questions and comments. And feel free to put links. She's also going to be posting links of whatever we're talking about and whatever is relevant. So welcome, Garth.
Hey, thanks very much. This is very cool.
So how's lockdown been so far?
This is day 70 for me. So I guess since I'm counting the days, it's mixed. But I feel every day, I feel lucky that I have a place, a roof over my head, food, and I can make an income from being inside. And so many people I know aren't in this position. The majority of people I know are either still have to work, and props to them for that. But also just maybe are in a more precarious housing situation or something. As you know, I guess I wake up every day and I want to go do something, but I'm like glad that I don't have to. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Oh my God, absolutely.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same way with homelessness. I've had a lot of invites to go and work in shelters, and like I want to go and help, but I also don't want to risk my life, and so I do have the luxury of not doing that. I feel guilty because that's my line of investigation and scholarship, and like you deal with active users and justice and stuff like that. But when it comes down to your life, it's hard to get out there and do that kind of work, right?
Yeah, so. It feels kind of cut off. Like I'm used to being an organizer and just being out in the world and at meetings and stuff, and I'm here with like Lisa and the cat looks at me like, why are you in the house so much? What's wrong with you? You know? So it's like, it is kind of weird, but I've gotten to do some stuff in this time. Like Crackdown is still making podcast episodes. And so we're doing that from inside our apartments. And also I got to read your book, Jesse, which was fantastic. And I realized we have these really strange moments in common just through reading about your life. And also I have learned the pentatonic scale in music, so which I don't know any music. So these are my accomplishments.
Those are hard to learn.
Yeah.
I never learned them. I was in a punk band before I was producing music in A Tribe Called Red. I was I don't know if you knew this or not, but I was a drummer for the Ripcords for like a tour and an album-ish. Like I wrote part of an album with them.
I played with the Ripcords, man. I opened for them in Ottawa in like a long time ago in a band called Lumpen Proletariat. Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
That's so dope in Ottawa.
Porter Hall. Yeah.
Porter Hall. Yeah.
I climbed up on top of the speaker stacks and nearly killed myself.
Was that wasn't the Rancid show, was it?
Rancid at Porter Hall No, I've played with Rancid in Berkeley, like in at Gilman Street in Berkeley. But
wow!
Never in Ottawa. Yeah.
Wow, that must have been something.
Yeah. So I really and this is like old. This is a long time ago for people who don't know those bands, right? And so I have no excuse for not really knowing how to play music. Like I knew bar chords and stuff, and I just thought, oh, the guitar is an instrument of propaganda. Is it really an instrument of music? Turns out that it is. Who knew? You know?
Your music that you're writing right now is super political, but like in a historic sort of sense, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like you're really telling like stories in a folk sort of way, but yeah, really historical settings.
Yeah, I kind of think that's one of the great things about, like, I mean, it's such a cliche, but storytelling is like how I understand the world. Probably everybody does. It's what we do in the podcast. It's what I do in songwriting right now. And it's kind of a function of like, I'm middle-aged, right? Like, so I'm in my 40s and I've been around enough to see some shit. And so I should probably explain it to anybody else who wasn't there. And it's kind of like part of the job, at least my job as an activist who's been around for a bunch of struggles over 25 years, 30 years. Like, I gotta say, shit, this has happened before, you know. It seems like that's the gig sometimes, you know?
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like, that's a great segue to maybe explain to the public what exactly your podcast is, because I was enthralled with it all afternoon, and it speaks right to what you're talking to. You're making known and defending and advocating, and I just think people should know what Crackdown is.
Well, it's a podcast that comes out of like a group of our experiences here in Vancouver as drug users. I've been an opioid user my whole adult life, pretty much. You know, I was on heroin for a big chunk of it. I'm on methadone now, but 5 years ago, when people started really dying from the overdose crisis around here, I kind of counted up how many people I'd lost, maybe 50, and I stopped counting. Like there's many more. And I kind of had like this feeling of survivor's guilt, and also weird, like I've been an activist in lots of struggles, against the Nazis, in support of immigrants and refugees, against colonization, been a trade unionist, all this stuff. But I never was kind of out about the fact that I'm an old school dope fiend. And I realized my friends were dying, and I kind of had survivor's guilt. And I thought, I got to apply my radio skills and activism to this thing that's really close to home. So I had to kind of admit my own drug use, and that was really hard. But also, I don't know if you had this, Jesse, but fantastically liberating once you get all that shit off your chest, and no one can kind of beat you with a secret from your past anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's what the podcast is about. It's about a group of us trying to show that like the whole drug war is this big, massive colonial racist construction that is really injuring people, and we can defeat it through civil disobedience and social movement organizing and all that kind of stuff. Except for we do it in a kind of a non-lectury way, hopefully non-boring-y way, and like give it over to the voices of the people who are really affected, have a little bit of academic sort of interview in there, and tie it all up with some power chords and like old school Moog beats, and give it to people.
It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant.
Thanks.
And like Jesse said, like you know, absolutely enthralled, because there was the stories and situations that were extremely devastating, and like you were mentioning, like death tolls, and the one specifically about that one episode that you had about the methadone changing.
Mm-hmm.
And that prescription changing from one manufacturer to another, and how devastating that was to the drug using community, right? And that's something that I've never heard of. And just hearing, yeah, sorry, if you can elaborate on that situation, just so people, you know, could hear about it.
Sure. Methadone is kind of like a nicotine patch, like it's less harmful than your old smokes here, but it still gives you the thing that you're actually addicted to, so you're not harming yourself as much. And that's what the nicotine patch is. Methadone's kind of the same thing. It's like the drugs on the street are contaminated with fentanyl and all kinds of other crap that people mix in there, like pig dewormer and household detergent and all this. So the idea is get something from the pharmacy that's kind of the same molecule, and then you don't have to risk your life and your liberty from not going to jail and all that on the street. So that was for me, methadone worked pretty good. Then about 5 years ago, they shifted this formulation. Methadone's been around for decades. Everybody knows what it does. Everybody kind of chafes against how strict the rules are about it, but they live with it. Then they changed it out here and in lots of places in Ontario too, to this big pharma brand that doesn't last as long. So halfway through the day, it's not holding you anymore. You're feeling dope sick. You're getting those withdrawal symptoms. Sick. That's right.
Yeah.
And that's the one job of methadone, is so you don't feel that way. And so we sort of, there's 25,000 people out here, and across the country, there must be a couple 100,000 people on methadone. And so we tried to start organizing and trying to get the government to shift it back or do something. And we had to go do freedom of information records requests and all kinds of interviews and studies to prove that this was actually happening and try and make some headway. And so we have, but it's quite a long process. And we're still fighting for different kinds of prescriptions that people can get that are like the same thing. I mean, fundamentally, I think prescription heroin is a really great substitute for actual heroin on the street. If people are dying from contaminated heroin, you can get prescription heroin. Other places in the world do this. If we really cared as a country about dead drug users, we just make it available to people by prescription.
Yeah, I've advocated for that myself. Zoe Dodd was on, and we predicted almost prophetically that once the border was shut for a few weeks, that we'd see a spike in overdoses, because we need that safe supply of medicated heroin distributed from the government, and there was no action, and almost like clockwork, we saw that spike, right? And so experts know the impacts of not having this safe supply, and what it's doing is just like the political will just doesn't exist there. And it's hard to argue for that, right? Could you give us any examples of where there are good data for people to reference for places that have been successful doing that?
I mean, the studies I think about happen in this town. They were called there was 2 prescription heroin studies over the last 15 years, and they tested it, and the people who were on the studies, were able to stop having interactions with law enforcement, remake connections with family, start working again, health improvements, housing, like all of that stuff, and the results are quite profound. So you can see that people can put things back together. Like, I don't know about you, Jesse, I got the impression from reading your book that a lot of the harms in your life from drugs, like in mine, came from the fact that they were illegal and expensive. So the shit you had to do to get money for them, and the fact that that was illegal and the drugs were illegal, almost as much as the molecule or the drug itself. I mean, at least for me, I noticed that.
Well, it was far more destructive. I think like William S. Burroughs shot heroin his whole life and wrote wicked books because he had access to money and it didn't hurt him. And you have like some of these rock stars that live for decades on it. It's because it's the lifestyle that leads to, you know, brushes with a criminal element. You're in contact with the underworld. People are giving you, I remember they used to give me like wax and stuff, and I'd smoke that and it just destroy my lungs, right? And like just things that were laced with probably poison and all kinds of stuff that were just doing me in. And I think like if I was given a safe supply of something, you know, that some sort of in the cocaine family that would have weaned me off of it, I would have been okay. I really would have.
That's what we're fighting for as a social movement of drug users out here, is a safe supply, and that means prescription heroin, prescription cocaine. People can rock it up if they want to for their own use, whatever. Prescription fentanyl, you know, like it started as a prescription. The deadly thing about all of these things is not the molecule itself, not the chemical itself. It's all the crap that gets put into it. Same thing happened with alcohol prohibition, you know, back in the day.
Right.
Everyone drank beer. Then boom, the law comes down. And then people are making moonshine. It's unregulated. People are drinking the moonshine and, you know, getting sick and dying and all that stuff. And then they end prohibition and boom, everyone's drinking beer again. You know,
yeah. The prohibition is what created the large, you know, organized crime syndicates in North America. Was that those laws? You know, it did more before that. There wasn't really organized crime on that scale, and the same thing goes for the prohibition on marijuana before, and now it's hard drugs, and they're just creating these networks of criminal organizations. Well, if you created supply and a place where people could get them, it would drive those markets out and be so much safer for so many people, and ultimately save a lot of money for society in terms of prosecution. But it's
God, yeah. I mean, I was in this jail in California, and it was this sprawling complex. It just went across the desert, like you just like, you know, wings and wings and wings of this thing. And everybody I talked to in there was in there for drugs. You know, like I had a drug charge on me in there. Everybody did. And actually, that's one thing in your book. I traded my food to keep myself safe, which is kind of a variation of what you said you did in the book, you know, because if people fucked with me, they'd be fucking with all these other dudes who were like lined up to get my chicken on Thursday and stuff like that, right? Because if I went to the infirmary for 2 weeks, there'd be like these dudes missing their chicken. So I made food arrangements with the scariest dudes that I could find. And it worked, you know. But yeah, so when I was reading From the Ashes, I was just like, oh yeah,
that's an old jail trick someone told me about, and it works, right? People care about their calories in there, right?
Absolutely, because they don't give you enough food to actually feel like, at least when I've been, you feel kind of vaguely hungry all the time. And I didn't have any money on the commissary, right? Like if I was going to be there for I thought I was going to be there for 2 years less a day. If that had turned out, I would have sorted that out more. But it's just like, you know, you're just hungry all the time.
Yeah. Good times. Hey, good times.
It's amazing how like food will always like create a bond between people. Like it's the same thing. Like I knew people who were in the army, and when they came back and I was sharing food, they'd be like, "Oh, you'd be good in the army if you're able to share food." Like that's kind of like how you get friends. So yeah, I wonder if that.
You know what I noticed in jail, and this is just a theory. I think that we're training people to be better drug dealers by putting them in jail.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we give them this restricted resource, food, that they have to maximize through trading and violence. That's the same technique that people have to use if they're dealing drugs on the streets, right? And it's like, we're training them to be better drug dealers. And I was like, wow, you come out of here, this is like university to trade tobacco. You graduate into like hardcore, you know, on the streets. So I'm like, I don't know if you've seen that, but I feel that way.
Oh yeah, and we had nothing to do except for exchange tips and tricks, right? Like, so it was like, I mean, this is a cliche, but it's kind of like con college. You learn all this stuff, or I did anyway, about dealing and distribution and manufacture that you wouldn't have learned before because you're just sitting around with these guys for hours and hours. Like there was a guy who was pretty high up on California cocaine, crack distribution and stuff. And, he was there, right? It was like, I get in booked in, and I'm like this skinny young kid. And so this guy comes up and he says, "Hey, it's my turn to mop the floor." And I said, "Good for you. Have a nice time." He says, "No, no, no. When it's my turn to mop the floor, you're going to mop the floor." So I'm mopping the floor, and he's like jeering at me from the side. He's like, "Bigger strokes. You missed a spot, blah, blah, blah," like that. Right. Mop over to the TV, and there's this huge dude, and he's watching Inspector Gadget. You remember that cartoon?
Yeah.
He's watching Inspector Gadget, and I'm slowing down, and I'm just like, I sort of forget that I'm mopping because I'm watching the cartoon. And he goes, "Hey man, are you down with the inspector?" And I said, "Hell yeah." He said, "Sit down." I said, "Oh, I'm mopping the floor." He's like, "No, you're fucking not. This guy over here, it's his turn. You're mopping the floor." And now he made that guy mop the floor when it was my turn. So now me and this guy, we just watch Inspector Gadget, right? He puts his arm around me. He goes, "I want to tell you a secret, man. Inspector Gadget doesn't know what's going on. It's his niece Penny," right? And of course, if you've ever watched the cartoon, it's obvious. It's true. He's like a klutz, right? But he also like schooled me on his various other tricks of the trade in between the commercials and stuff of Inspector Gadget. But also that guy prevented me from probably having my ass kicked because he was a very respected guy inside. But so thank you to Inspector Gadget for that hand up there.
I loved Inspector Gadget growing up.
Right?
It was like, it was something that I used to like run to the couch and do a headstand because when it said like Inspector Gadget, he came down to like dot the I or some shit.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's true.
Can you do that right now?
Yeah, not right now. I would though. Here's a question from Amanda Stoke on Facebook. Have you been able to connect with Johann Hari or have read his book Chasing the Screen? The book, along with my studies, changed my whole perspective on drug use.
I did read his book. I've never met him, but yeah, it's a good book. Yeah.
No, I
Have
haven't.
you read him, Jesse?
No, I haven't. I will. I'll look it up though. No.
Mm-hmm. He also has one about alienation, loneliness, and mental health. I think it's called Broken Connections. I haven't read that. It's supposed to be good.
That's my theory of homelessness. That's what I believe homelessness and addiction is. It's these like trauma informs a lot of addiction. I won't say it is addiction, but it informs it because it feels good to use drugs too. We just do it to have fun sometimes too.
Hell yeah.
Right? And but a lot of it is self-medication. And then homelessness is like an amputation from social connection over time. So it sounds kind of like this Johann
Hari.
person. Yeah. Johann Hari's theories.
Yeah, I think Gabor Mate said that the opposite of addiction is connection or something like that. Or somebody said that. Anyway,
yeah. He just recently called me and I did an interview with him. He read my book and he's like, "Oh, dude, I got to talk to you." And we had like a good conversation. Really nice guy. Funny too, though. Have you ever talked to him before?
No, he's been the doctor for a few people who are on our editorial board before, but I haven't met him personally.
Yeah. Hey, I remember like
you guys are the level of famous people that I get to meet, right? This is and no diss, but what's his name? Johann Hari like jets around the world and gives talks everywhere, and like Gabor Mate goes to the UN to give talks and stuff like that. So I don't know if we've broken into the ranks on the podcast where we can get people who are, but I guess in quarantine people aren't jetting around anywhere, so maybe now is a good time to try and book guests like that.
This is the move. That's the move.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, your podcast is so professional though. I'm sure you could attract all those big names, you know. Yeah. Sorry, Ian,
It,
go ahead.
no. It's important too. Like your podcast is actually like changing people's ideas and people that actually have the power to make change. Like I know like some legislators you've sat down and talked with in BC. Is that right, Garth?
Yeah. We have. Yeah, we've. In fact, now since COVID started, ministers are willing to do interviews with us. We used to just get nope from ministers, but now I've talked to the housing one and the addiction minister, and we did talk to a former health minister as well in a previous episode. So yeah, not heard back from the prime minister's office yet, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's like
Good luck
out
with
here
that.
we heard a lot of like stuff in the news about like safe supply being administered, and then it just kind of disappeared. Can you tell us what's actually going on the ground out there right now?
Sure. Yeah. It was maybe the first week after the lockdown started, and a doctor from the downtown east side calls me and says, "Hey, what do drug users need to quarantine?" And I'm like, drugs, food, TV, little food, social connection, whatever. Like we were trying to think of what you need to not go outside every day to score drugs, but principally it's safe supply. It's the drug that you would go to score, you need by prescription. She was trying to figure out, once drug users start testing positive for COVID-19, how do you quarantine? And if you want to self-isolate, if you're going to self-isolate and not be interacting all the time to slow the spread and flatten the curve and all that, how do you do that? And that turned into a policy discussion in the local health authority, and that turned into a policy paper in the province. And so I was one of the co-authors of this, I guess, what turned into a policy, which is weird, right? This is how crazy a pandemic it is. It's suddenly like I, who am nobody and don't work for the Ministry of Health or anything like that, was author on this paper. And the policy is that people can get prescribed a bunch of drugs that they wouldn't ordinarily get, like Dexedrine, like benzodiazepines, like Dilaudid, and other opioids. So not quite what we were talking about earlier, not quite getting prescribed cocaine, heroin, and fentanyl at the pharmacy, but certainly a step up from methadone to try and reach towards this safe supply model. So that all happened in a week. It was incredibly fast. Like I've worked on tiny policy reforms, and you're just chipping away for years, and this happened very quick. But also, the addiction system across Canada is very old and calcified. People have been practicing for the same way for decades. It's often very patronizing. It's like they want to fix you and get you to abstinence and piss test you all the time and everything. So this shift to just letting people use drugs and be safe was too much, I think, for a lot of doctors. And they're just like, no way, not doing it. So in BC, we kind of had a great idea. It rolled out. There's some doctors are prescribing it. We're still sort of wrestling with different points in the system to try and clear it. But it was definitely a step in the right direction. They say it's not going to last. They say they're going to, it's only lasts as long as as COVID-19 lasts. And in fact, the rules are set to sunset in September. So we have a fight coming up to extend it. But it is a small reform, and there is a discussion amongst people in Ontario about this sort of thing too. So maybe this sort of step towards safe supply could be coming to a neighborhood near you. I don't know.
Like, how does the mechanics of that work in places like your tent city? Have they done what they've done here in Toronto, where they've rented out whole hotels? Like, how would doctors do that in
well, they had a few weeks ago, they passed a public safety order, and they cleared the tent cities, or they've cleared most of it. And this was, with police and fences and stuff like that. But there were hotel rooms and shelter spaces. And us in the podcast, we're working on an episode of this right now. So we're still chasing down people to find out what their experiences have been with this. I'm quite concerned about when you break up like a tent city, you break up that community of people who found a way to try and be safe with each other. So like in that tent city in Oppenheimer Park in the downtown east side of Vancouver, there was an overdose prevention site that was still going. So there was a way for people to use and be safe right in the middle of that tent city. And so when you break up those sort of connections and mutual aid, it's like, well, it's like you were saying, Jesse, like how when you're precariously housed or you don't have a house, those connections can get amputated. But here's people kind of building the limbs back on. So I guess the jury's out on how that will work. But I guess the doctors or the social workers can go visit people in their hotel room and do that prescribing. I don't know whether that's happening yet. So we'll see.
I know here in Toronto that there are doctors, Indigenous doctors actually, that are going into hotels and administering benzos. I don't know about the other drugs, but I know for benzos for sure. I was talking with my friend who's doing that, so it's hopeful. It's happening, right?
That's good.
Yeah. I think we have a question here from Amanda Stoke. How can we support our friends living in remote and Indigenous communities who are struggling with high rates of addiction? Do you know?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I think it probably depends on like nation to nation. You know, there are some places that are doing programs. There's a First Nation Health Authority here in BC where some of the local, like the Stalo leaderships, sort of struggled with the federal government for a bunch of years and took back control over health authority for people who are living on reserve, and that might have some resources. There's a group here called the Western Aboriginal Harm Reduction Society, and we work alongside them a lot. But they mostly are working with people on the downtown east side of Vancouver here, so they don't often go into the remote communities that you're talking about. So really, I don't, since I'm not there, I'm not really in a good place to say.
I think that's the best answer you could give, is like it depends on nation and nation basis. It depends on their problems. It depends on their spirituality, like their language, like all of it is very important factors in how you're going to heal somebody. Yeah. I wonder how that would work. I guess like it'd have to be very, very specific. Um, as like yeah, I'm just trying to think of like what nations are like very remote and how different they are, even if they're like close to each other. There's a question here from Carl Dockstader that says safe supply, harm reduction, and taking people struggling with substance use out of criminal courts works, but politicians are slow to adapt these approaches. Is there a way to shift political will to support better approaches?
I could have a kick at that one if you want. I think what's worked in the past is social movement organizing and sometimes civil disobedience. So there's safe injection sites in lots of places in this country now, but they were illegal for a long time. And here in Vancouver, we opened them without permission. Like we just did it, broke the law, and pushed through. And we're kind of like, come and arrest us, and we'll challenge you in court. And I know in Toronto, Zoe Dodd was involved in doing the same thing. Yeah. And that's how you make progress, not just on rights for drug users, but for like anything. Like it's how we have the weekend. It's like why we have 8-hour work days. It's why women can vote. It's like every single thing that's good, people have fought for, and every single thing that's shitty is like, it shows you a fight that's like still going on, maybe. At least maybe that's an oversimplification, but it's kind of how I think it works. People don't get the political will until you arm twist them into the political will. Like nothing good comes for free.
Yeah, I think as Indigenous people, we know that. Speaking on that, we're doing new things on the show, and one of them is like on this day in Indigenous history, and I think Jesse had something prepared that he wanted to share. You're on mute, bro. You're muted.
Oh, sorry. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this bit's about like revising colonial history, because a lot of the roots of power come from the false telling of history. So we're doing it from the indigenous perspective. So on this day in 1642, the Euro-Canadian city of Montreal was founded by some lost French lady and some French dude and a Jesuit priest who wandered into the forest from Quebec City along the St. Lawrence River, some 300 kilometers to an old Haudenosaunee or Ganagahage trading site known as Teotihuacan or Ile Montreal at the confluence of the St. Lawrence and Ottawa River. When the French arrived there, they bumped into a couple of cool native dudes who were just fishing there. The two guys took them up Montreal Mountain to show them the sweet terrain and all their cool hangout spots. But the poor French people didn't realize that the two native guys were just being polite hosts, as hosts do. They weren't inviting the French to invade and hang out at their spot permanently. Little did the French realize that Ile de Montreal was a battleground between the Algonquin and Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee, who wanted to control the St. Lawrence River Valley and fur trade. They'd find out soon enough, as they, as unwanted guests, were attacked repeatedly by the Haudenosaunee for the next 60 years. I can't help thinking that it was a setup by those two native guys. Whatever the case, I want to give a shout out to those two native guys who tricked the French into pitching their fort into what was essentially a death trap. So that's it. Thank you.
Mano. That's great. I like that history.
Yeah. Reverse the narrative, you know?
A word. Yeah. I gotta teach a word now. The word I'm gonna teach, I think, is the word for hospital. I think it works out well too with the description on how it breaks down. But the word for hospital is oxegamgong, and oxe means to be sick. When you're oxe means like you got a sickness. Gamik is like a building, and that ong sound is like a locative marker. So oxegamgong is like the building where you're sick in.
Oxegamgong.
How do you say that again?
Oxegamgong.
Oxegamgong.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Mino. Great work.
Yeah.
Hey, we got a friend. We got another homie that just walked in. And check this out, everybody. It's award-winning author Tanya Talaga.
Hey.
Welcome.
Good to see you guys.
Yeah.
Nice. Hey.
So excited to have you. Tanya, so you've done a lot of research. Both of you, Garth and Tanya, have a lot of like journalistic background, and also like covering epidemics.
Yep.
Maybe you guys can both comment like you know, how you're approaching like both of your jobs through COVID right now, but also like, you know, how your approach to pandemics are a bit different in your journalistic milieus.
You know, Bazoo, Garth, it's really nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too.
You know, you do incredible work. You really do.
For your writing too.
Thank you. You know, and so like listening to what you're saying, we all fight the same battle of inequality. You know, one of the things, and you know, you asked about covering the pandemic. One of the things I keep on thinking about is inequality and how that is really being sort of blown open with the pandemic. You know, you see it in our communities when it comes to healthcare. You see it on the streets. You see our people. We have lots of addiction issues with our people, you know, or homelessness. And we see all of these answers that are happening, like, you know, you being asked to write policy, Garth, for the BC government, which is so awesome. Like there's a moment now that we have, I think, to address the serious inequalities that we face here as a society in this country. And my fear is that we just won't go far enough. You know, when this ends and when, like you were saying, that in September, that policy that you're working on goes. Like how do we do that? Like how do we stop that rollback? And a lot of what I've been thinking about lately is having to do with that inequality and the housing issues that we're having. Jesse, you mentioned that the hotels that are happening and motels that are being rented out here in Toronto. We have one down the street, which is so incredible and so needed. And is that going to stop? What are we going to do? What are we going to do with everyone? Like all the women that are in the shelter, and Indigenous women right now are really on the front lines of this. What we're seeing with inequality, right? With addictions, with so many things. And so when I think of where we go forward, I wonder if we will have you talked about political will, because we need political will to change all of these things, right? Like, and Jesse was asking, where are we hearing about opioids, the crisis? It's like, you turn on the news, I'm not hearing anything about it. I'm not hearing anything. Like, I don't know what's going on in Ontario until Jesse told me, as the doctor that's going in and giving benzos to people. I mean, I can't even imagine what it's like for people that are suffering this way with addictions. And what do we do to turn this around, like to turn this political will around so people listen?
Well, in housing, I know that they tied it to a human right. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. I know that in housing, they tied it to the human right to housing in Canada, and that's making a lot of headway. But I don't know if there anything exists for drug users, which, perhaps there should be. Garth, could you talk to that, or?
Yeah, I asked the minister responsible for housing in an interview we did for an upcoming episode of the podcast. I asked the minister, can you guarantee that people won't be evicted from the hotels where they are housed now when this is all over? And he sort of demurred. He sort of was like, well, we're going to have some conversations about that. I'm going to try. And there was no commitment there, and I asked the minister who's responsible for addictions, can you promise me that this policy is not going to evaporate, when COVID's over in September? And she was like, well, yeah, we'll have to see, and I got these kind of answers. So I agree with Tanya and Jesse. What you're saying is this is all very provisional. And people ask me, well, why did it happen to begin with, this policy or this housing? And I know they never saw us as human beings. We never convinced them we were human beings before. They never saw us as human beings now. They saw us as disease vectors and got scared. And so they wanted to find walls for us, and walls that we would stay inside. And the moment that fear evaporates, so too does those benefits. So it's like we will have to fight to keep them. And I do think that, in the first couple of weeks of the crisis, of the lockdown and everything, there was this moment. There was this: are we going to go for a universal basic income? Are we going to do some real wealth and power redistribution? And people were like, really felt, anything's possible. I think that's not out there anymore. I think that they've kind of been tuning the amount of reform they think they can get away with. They found that sort of floor, and they're going to be clawing it back in time. And the real push is going to be rebuilding the normal world, the pre-virus world. And that's going to be a hard thing to see, and we will have to fight against that. But I think the question you were asking is like, as practicing journalism and practicing journalism to cover epidemics, what does this look like? It's like, at the beginning, I thought, oh, wow, I've never seen anything like this before. And now I think I've completely fucking seen this before. You just see, it took a couple of weeks for it all to shake out, but everyone found their traditional political feet and stood there. I think there's some interesting things that are happening, like in BC, a lot of Indigenous communities declared emergencies and closed. And that's not just like, it's not something that was done like saying, oh, we're just posting a sign or something. It's also like this statement of sovereignty, and it happens kind of in the context of battles about major industrial projects and stuff. And so I think, at least the people I know, it sounds like people are wanting to continue that kind of like local autonomy and decision making past the end. But then the province, the government of British Columbia very quickly ruled, well, we're declaring one big emergency. And so all your local emergencies are kind of null and void.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I think it went into the regular Canadian hole of what government, federal or provincial, really gets to say something like that, and there it rests.
Mm-hmm.
But I could see in remote communities and here in Vancouver that reassertion of the normal happening. And really that's what happens in all the emergencies that I've experienced, in all the sort of the epidemics. Like, I've been through the overdose epidemic now. There was one in the 90s. There's HIV epidemic. I survived all those things. And you really see who they care about, who they want to protect, and who's just like, who they don't give a shit about. And it's always the same people, you know.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You know, it's just so true. Just even getting back to like Kim Wheeler just said on our chat that it's like been all COVID all the time. And I remember when this first started, there was nothing about what was happening in our First Nations communities at all on the news. You know, you were hearing about COVID, but you weren't hearing about what was going on in the communities themselves. And a lot of the communities too, they do not have the resources. I mean, they shut because they have to for survival reasons. There are no doctors. There are no health clinics. There's no nurses. They don't have all the equipment that's needed, and so those communities just have to put a circle around them. But you're right, though. At the end of the day, we go back to those old systems, those old colonial systems. The health system that was created in this country, for example, was never created with us in mind. You know, so it's like it was never broken. It's doing what it's intended to do for Indigenous people and for addicts too, for people that are struggling with all of these things. And turning that around, you know, you're right too. I'm glad you brought up the universal basic income. It's a smart thing to do, you know. Well, the political will get there for people. You know, just people need that hand up sometimes, just a little bit. And it can mean so much more. When you look at all the money that's going to the airline industry, all the money that's going to all of these different like businesses, big businesses, if they need a loan, surely we could do a universal basic income.
Mm-hmm.
They just prove that they can't. You know what I mean? Like they came up with like all this money, and again, like, why don't we just take all those? I think there's 250 billion that's in that offshore account that we all just learned about and nobody talked about.
Yeah. All the money,
you know,
their taxes.
Yeah, just take that.
Yeah, look at the money that they were expecting people on ODSP. I don't know what you call that in BC, like disability payments. It's like $1,000 a month, and CERB automatically is 2,000. Like, why are we treating our citizens that way, especially those in need most? You know, so it's it just shows the iniquity. You know.
Yeah.
Just keep CERB going. You know, keep the emergency payouts going. Pay everybody $2,000 a month, and then tax wealth. Right? There was in the world wars in the 20th century. That's where income taxes came from, and everyone's like, I can't even comprehend that idea. It's impossible. And then it became normal. Well, let's tax wealth, not just income, right? Like, taxing income only is just getting people at the very bottom. You know, and there's so much wealth flying around that is not taxed. That's what we got to do. Start the redistribution, you know?
Yeah. There needs to be like a maximum wage. You know what I mean? Like, we have a minimum wage that we've had forever, but there needs to be a maximum wage. And we'll say, like, I don't know, $900 million, and be like, okay, once you make $900 million, we're going to, I don't know, throw a parade for you. Way to go. You won capitalism. And now everything else you make goes back into the community, right? And you get a plaque, and then we carry on. Like, I think that there needs to be like a maximum amount that you're allowed to make without, because what can you do with 900 million that you can't do with, like, you know, $1 billion? Like, it's ridiculous. There's nothing like.
I mean, Mr. Amazon is about to be a trillionaire, right? Like the world's first trillionaire. What?
Honestly, how obscene is it that we're talking about this amid this pandemic and this like collapse of capitalism and this collapse of like the social contract, that how we're supposed to interact? We're discussing trillionaires right now. Like, it's so obscene.
I mean, that's more money than most countries get in GDP, right? Like, that's a huge amount of money.
That's like, I think it was my buddy Andre Domis on Twitter was like, $1 trillion isn't fuck you money. $1 trillion is like leave the world in your image money. Like, he can like change everything with this.
Yeah.
And the only way that I think that we can like stop and like break his power hold is when we're like, yo, bro, we don't need your money. Like I'm growing food with my community. We're building each other's houses. I don't need your job. I don't need your stuff. I'm good. We're good here. And until like we break that, like, you know, the magic that money is this solver of everything without really understanding what that system actually is. Yeah. Anyways, I'm going way beyond what I think where we're going, but you know, even at the same time, like if things get progressively worse, which I think it's going to, you know, hunting for moose and fishing is going to be a big part of a lot of our diets really soon, and we're going to have to learn how to connect with those things. And even like, you know, non-Indigenous people are going to have to start hanging out with Indigenous people to learn how to hunt these things properly. And yeah, it's that, like that's where I see things going. And for the first time, like, you know, I've been scared about getting my seedlings in. This is where I've been like worried about, like with this COVID happening. And now it's the winter. Now it's like, okay, I got to grow this stuff and make sure I pickled everything, because I don't know what's going to happen this winter. This winter is going to be scary. You know?
Yeah, I mean, if the pandemic last time 100 years ago is any indication, we're looking at the second wave. You know, and we have to think: is the country opening up too soon? Is this actually a public health decision, or is it just an economic decision? You know, and are we setting ourselves up for real deep pain in the fall and winter?
What's it look in BC right now? Because you guys are on, you're in stage 2 with the opening, right?
Mm-hmm. We've had a lot less deaths here and a lot less spread than a lot of places. And I don't know, I still don't know why. You know, I don't know whether it's just luck. And in Canada, we have a long bad tradition of interpreting luck as skill. So I do worry that could happen. But yes, touch wood, it's less. And so yeah, just this weekend they're starting to open some stuff. I mean, a lot of people have just they don't read the fine print. They just hear, oh, it's over, and just kind of run outside, right? So that's definitely happening. So yeah, I don't know what to do. I know our band has already had the discussion about when do we go back to the jam space and play, and I'm like, not yet, but I think it's soon.
Yeah, it's crazy how much this is affecting like all different industries. Like, not like that's just like what, you know, our hobbies also. But we were talking with Jesse Wente and a whole panel of people like in the movie industry, and we discussed like, yo, post COVID, like that whole industry is going to change. Whether we understand like how big the change is going to be yet, but you know, like movie theaters might not be a thing really soon. Big budget films, you know what I mean? Like those blockbuster films that have thousands or hundreds of people on set and stuff, like that's not going to be a thing anymore. So like it's going to make space for a lot of like indie, small, you know, 2 people movie made off of their cameras. And, you know, we're setting up fucking talk shows right now. Like, look, like again, like I bring this up often, how we have the same, like, you know, the production value of late night TV right now. You know, this is really, really leveling the playing field of a lot of broadcasting. I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah.
No, I think about that too. You know, like as somebody who's plays in a band and haven't played a gig for a while, and not many people would come to them. This could be my moment, you know.
Totally. Totally, and that's a very interesting. I DJ'd at the Toronto Music Festival, which was like an Indigenous music festival that I was supposed to, like, I was booked to play. That was this big outdoor festival, but they figured out how to do it online, and it was neat. It was really neat to see like a music festival online, and you know, it gave a spotlight also to like the emerging groups and the emerging bands that, you know, would play the side stage that people would normally miss, right? But now, like,
Right.
Hey, they're right before whoever. So it's been really cool to see people step up and how they're working this COVID right now. Another big thing is comedy. Comedy is a big thing. So like DJs and comedy are the 2 things that I follow on Instagram a lot. And, you know, at 7 p.m. you see everybody go live on Instagram at the same time.
What were the numbers like, Ian, at the show? Do you know?
Yeah, they mentioned something about like on the first day, 24,000 viewers or something. Like it was a big number.
Wow.
That's a stadium. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Like I feel like that was like more eyes on that than would have like been there physically, which is great, you know.
Huh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cool.
That's pretty cool. I mean, I've done a lot of meetings and stuff on Zoom and whatever, and like you can see how not having big gatherings and big conferences could, that could open up spaces for other types of stuff. But I do still miss those just getting together with people. Like I really feel the lack of that.
Yeah. People are gonna maybe go up to here with Zoom pretty soon. I think, maybe another month. And everyone's just gonna go.
Yeah.
Definitely. It says here, this is Sue Lin, and she's got a good question. They do not want real solutions. Being a dependent solidifies their system. There is a need for codependency. It creates jobs. And right now, in words of my brother, Indian pain is big business, which is very true. We foster their system without the lands, people and resources. They would fail to exist. It's all a joke. They didn't have the funding, or they kept our people budgeted, and yet they are throwing it around like there's endless access. Makes one wonder and question everything. Yeah, it's the whole thing is based on dominance and control. This is something that I've been learning in the teachings and language. But colonial ideology is all based on dominance and control. So much so that Canada is called the Dominion of Canada. Right? It's about like dominating and controlling everything. So going into the land and tilling what I want when I want is like a very colonial ideology that goes against our understanding of what it means to be a human being. Where our understanding of farming was knowing about like taking care of different things and the interactions of and cause and effect of me taking care of these plants will give me something over here. And we understood how all of that worked and the nuances. And it wasn't based on dominance and control. It was based on a treaty relationship where if I do this, you'll give me this. And it's a beneficial relationship between two beings. So the whole system, if it's based on measuring wealth on how much you accumulate in a hoard, and everything is to be dominated, they're going to remove indigenous people from the land by disconnecting them, by getting rid of their language. Right, our languages are the connection to the land, and the instruction manuals of how everything works. So, they remove the language from the native. That way, they lose that connection to the land, and then you can make money off of the laborer, and then also money off of the land that they were connected to. Right. So you gotta see this as like a capitalist ideology. There's always like, ways to make money off of everything. And you gotta, that's the capitalist mindset.
Yeah. It's the Judeo-Christian belief, right? Man at the top of all of creation of everything. And then from man, everything else flows, as opposed to the Anishinaabe belief. It's all a circle. It's all a continuum. Everyone has a place. Everybody belongs. Everyone has a purpose. There was no word for chief in our language that the British used. It's totally different, right? Like, our is a Ogama, which means the person that is responsible, right?
It actually meant like someone who kept like a ledger, like someone who kept track of stuff. So they kept track of who was away. They kept track of like, who was pregnant, who was getting food, what we had. So they, I first learned this because the word in a dictionary that I had called Indian Affairs, Junya Ogama. And Junya means money, and Ogama, I knew it as meaning leader, right? So it was like money leader. That's really interesting interpretation. And then I learned that Ogama just meant like keeper, tracker of. So they were our bankers. We saw the Indian Affairs as people to keep track of our money. That's it. That's all they were supposed to be. Like, okay, we're gonna have this new.
Good for you. Yeah.
Yeah. The other word for leader.
The concept of like, there wasn't one person up there making these decisions. Like, there's a concept of like being the collective, right? And like everyone working for the greater good, which is very different.
Yeah, the other word for leader and the idea of leadership is nigonage. Like nigon means like ahead of you. Nigonage means like the being that's ahead of you, and it's referencing somebody that you want to follow. So it's like, yo, they're living such a good life that I just want to do what they're doing. It has nothing to do with telling us what to do. Like both of our definitions or explanations or words, I guess, for leadership, none of them entail like people telling us what to do. You know. Mm.
So is that Negon St. Clair's? Is that what his name means? Negon?
Like leader, yeah.
Oh wow, I
Ahead.
didn't know that. Wow, thank you.
Yeah,
That's cool.
yeah. And like ing ong, that as I mentioned before, that in gamgong, that ing ong, that means like the place of. So our word for the future is nigoning, which is like that place that's ahead of us. Lots of nuances in these languages.
Yeah. And in
and
So I got a question for you, Garth. Do you know if there's any managed opioid programs on the West Coast like there is in Ottawa?
Yeah, like there's a small prescription heroin program here. As mentioned earlier in our discussion, there was a couple of studies to see how prescription heroin would work over the past 15 years. And so people were recruited to these studies, about 100 or so each. And prescribed heroin worked out really well. People were able to reconnect with family and start work and get houses and improve health and everything. But then at the end of the studies, they would just kind of kick people back to the curb. And this guy, Dave Murray, organized with all these patients, these people who'd survived these studies, to say we can't get cut off. Once something is medically proven to be really effective for people, it's like against ethics. There's even an international declaration called the Helsinki Declaration that says you can't do that.
Well,
and
do not cause harm, right?
Yeah.
And if they know that like taking this away is going to cause harm, like they can't ethically do that. Anyway, sorry, it's making me so angry hearing this. Yeah,
definitely. And this was the first one in the country. And of course, Harper wanted to shut this down. This is the first managed opioid program, I guess, like that. And so there was a there was a court court action to try and back off Health Canada and let people keep getting this stuff. And they won. They forced the government to back down. And so there is 100 or between 100 and 150 people who are on prescription heroin right now as a legacy of those studies and a legacy of this guy, Dave Murray's activism. And Dave was a friend of mine. He was on our editorial board, on the Crackdown podcast editorial board. And last week he died. And so we have been missing him. And I know his legacy, the legacy of his activism, is the opportunity for people to get this stuff. And the policy that I worked on owes a debt to him. The fight that we're going to have to keep it owes a debt to his work. The ability to keep people alive, to keep the next 4,000 people from dying per year in Canada of overdose is going to be a debt to Dave Murray. So when you ask that, it makes me think of my friend who we just lost.
I'm so sorry, man.
Yeah, sorry, dude.
Yeah.
Rest in peace.
For real. And like, being friends with you on Twitter and being friends with Zoe, like hearing it's once a week, I feel like Zoe's saying, RIP to a new friend. And it's, the weight that you guys carry definitely doesn't go unnoticed. And it's heavy. It's really, really heavy.
Yeah, we're probably the most depressing people to follow on Twitter. I don't recommend it, but yeah, it adds up, and you feel a lot of grief and frustration all at the same time. But I know, I work with communities of people who've just had like waves of loss for generations or centuries, and it's like that destruction. We have people just in our little circle that make the podcast who have been, displaced off of their nation, then displaced off of gentrification, who've faced the sort of the terror of the missing and murdered women here on the downtown east side, and the HIV epidemic of the 90s where Vancouver had the highest transmission rates in the industrial world, the overdose crisis then, the overdose crisis now. It's just like constant. It's like it becomes your life. It becomes just like you expect it. And so when we built this podcast and we looked around the table and we all looked at each other and we kind of knew we're not all going to be here in a year, and we're just we're about a year and a half old right now. And we have lost 2 of our 8 members on the editorial board already, and it's just like a weird thing. You kind of want to protect your heart and not be close to people. But at the same time, you got to be close to people because it makes you human. It keeps you alive. It keeps them alive. It's how we all survive is with each other. And I know that that's kind of a sweeping historic pain that I am just getting a taste of. And I can't imagine how that bumps down generations and families. And, it's fucked up.
It's super fucked up.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Jesse.
I was talking with Ian before this afternoon about how when they changed the chemical signature from oxycodone to I forget what it is, so people could, like, the wave of people that died. I remember for me it was like every 3 months I would get a call, someone died. Then it was every 6 months, and now I just don't get those calls anymore. I know, and you're so close to the street. I know how that feels, man. I'm so sorry.
I remember that it was 2014, right? And the
Yeah.
federal government's what they call the non-insured health benefits, just to not acronym everybody, they delisted Oxy from that. And so like overnight, all of these people who are getting Oxy prescriptions in really remote communities on res or wherever, they got cut off, right? And what the fuck were those people supposed to do? It's like you're going to be sick as hell. And so that just meant a huge pulse of people from this prescribed medication now onto a contaminated heroin market where fentanyl was just entering. And this is that perfect moment of dominion. Just this one little move, like some senior official somewhere strikes out the Oxy on the formulary in the non-insured health benefits coverage, and all of a sudden thousands of people are within days sick, and then within a week or 2 start dying. And it's like you can just crystallize it into these moments of deep fuckery,
Yeah. And we're in the middle of another one right now. If we don't get safe supply out there while this is going on, it's just gonna escalate.
Yeah.
Some comments here, Garth, of condolences for your friend from Angela Reed.
Oh, thank you.
Soulful Healer.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's heavy, bro.
Thanks. Yeah. I'm still processing it, so I didn't know whether I was going to mention it or what I was going to do. But then it just falls out. Like I think, I'm going to decide something, and then it just happens. And
of course,
maybe you guys do that. Yeah.
Well, that's kind of what you mean when you say you're in the trenches. You're like a war correspondent, right? Like that really was striking, the wording around that. Could you unpack that a little bit for the listeners?
Yeah, I mean, the podcast Crackdown, it's like our tagline. We're covering the drug war as a war, and we're the war correspondents because there's dead. We lose people every day. There's like armies of occupation in our neighborhoods, basically the police enforcing these laws. There's political prisoners, people who are going to jail for just possessing a substance that's been deemed illegal, that I think they would happily have the legal pharmaceutical version of. So it really, the metaphor of a war makes way more sense to me than like a natural disaster, like a hurricane or a typhoon or a perfect storm, or like all these other kinds of metaphors, because wars are so fundamentally human creations,
And intentional, right? Intentional, like politically intentional.
I mean, I guess that it's weird. It's like the podcast is more about sociology or something than it is about drugs. I don't know. It's like we're just trying to make visible all these decisions that have been made, right? Like these forces, whether they're like just the last few years in my city or 150 years in this country or whatever, they're not just like the natural course of history or, oh, this happened and it's a tragedy and what a dark chapter. There's like humans who make these decisions, and they have names and they lived and they worked and they made the decisions. And I can't ever forgive some of them, you know, and I know everybody around this table won't forgive them too. And we all carry, I anyway, carry like a terrible burning hot stone sometimes inside some of those names and some of the anonymous people that I don't know made those decisions. And maybe we all do. And maybe part of healing is to get that hot stone out of you. But it is hard when the harms keep coming, when you can't, you know, like they like to say on the news, what a dark chapter of Canadian history. And as if they close the book and that's all over. And it's just like, well, wait a minute. When did the new chapter start? I mean, isn't it a dark book? Isn't it how does that metaphor work? You know, if it's still ongoing, how can you ever close the book?
Yeah, we're on to the next volume, right?
Yeah, it's like a fucking encyclopedia set.
You know? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you know, Murray Sinclair's used this word before. He's called it colonialism 2.0. You know, we're on the new round of colonialism, and that's very much what's going on, and the war is still going, right?
Yeah.
So what you're doing is perfect, right? It's
2.0 now with gaslighting.
That's right.
That's brilliant. So are you working on anything else right now, Garth, other than the podcast and music?
I guess I was reading, Jesse, in From the Ashes, how your life wound up in academia, and I think that's where I might be headed to. So I'm right now working on a PhD in journalism and public health, and
Wow.
I'm still trying to figure out what exactly that means when you squish those two things together. Like if you've ever had two cats and you've tried to kind of hold them at the same time, it feels a little bit like that right now. But I'll figure it out. And I have to figure out how I can write like I speak and not write like every second thing that I read in the coursework, which is dense and impenetrable.
Opaque. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm working on that a little bit. You know, I have I have a day job that I keep going with that I can't really be very public about because I'm also public about drug use. And when those two worlds collide, people get fired and stuff. So that happens. And then we're making the podcast, and I'm trying to learn how to play guitar properly. So those are all things that are happening.
Busy. Yeah. Well, congratulations on your PhD and for doing that.
Thank you.
That's really good.
Yeah. How far along are you? Do you have comps in your journalism?
Yeah, comps are imminent. Comps are coming. Comps would be here if it wasn't for this COVID thing. So it's upon me. Yeah.
Well, it's the winter storm. Once you get up on the other side of comps, it's nice. So
yeah,
keep going. Yeah.
It's weird, right? Because it's like the idea of academia is you stand aside and you observe something that you have nothing to do with, like you're in a lab or something like that. But then this is not like that. Like I'll read the literature. Like I was reading this ethnography of drug users in San Francisco, and it's crazy.
I just need to ask, like, what are comps? Before I just don't know what comps are.
Oh, okay.
It's when you're in Vegas and they give you an upgrade to your hotel.
I know those.
No, it's like it's a type of exam. It's for comprehensive exam, right, Jesse? And it's supposed to be like, have you mastered the discipline of X?
Yes.
You know, so it's like, can I ask you anything about astrophysics? And I guess that's the idea, right?
Yeah, and you got to speak through each of the, like in your discipline, they have different veins of arguments. So like for me, I had to read 200 books in 200 days and I had to memorize them. And that was for each of my comprehensive course lists. So it's history. And so I had to know what specific historian argued in what specific school of thought against which other historians. And it wasn't so much about what it was about what the arguments were. I don't know if journalism's that way, but it was horrendous. It was very hard.
Yeah.
No, journalism's not that way. No, not 200 books in 200 days. No. Yeah, it's a bit different. Mhm.
Yeah.
So this is like a
Were they-
interdisciplinary
they were
area of
comic
journalism and public health. Comic books? Yeah, I mean they
The
should.
200 books that you had to read, Jesse, were they comic books?
No, what they say you can't be a mole. You have to be a fox. So you have to jump through a book in 4 hours. You have to skim it and get the thesis, all the major arguments, and then look at how they're forming their arguments. What kind of primary resources are they using?
Wow, and you're
And-
reading academic books too, right? Like those are
Yeah.
hard. Those are like there's
Yeah. Well, that's why I have no hair left, right? Because of that.
I had a substantial reading list, but it wasn't 200, and I will take that to heart. I will be the fox and not the mole.
Do you have to write 4 term papers or one book? Like I have to write a book as a historian.
Yeah, it's pretty much a book, but it's really complicated. I'm trying to count the podcast work as part of it because there's a big academic component to what we do. We try really hard to make that less visible so you don't feel like you're consuming something that's academic, but we try to put a lot of research into the background of the audio pieces. So I'm trying to see if they'll bend to having a more audio component to the actual thesis. And
Yeah, I
they
noticed that.
seem willing so far.
I noticed your research with Ryan McNeil. He's Trudeau scholar, and so you had some pretty big names on there that are very well respected in the academic field.
Yeah, this guy blew my mind, right? Like I met him 5 years ago, and this is Ryan McNeil, our science advisor on the podcast, and he helps us, travel through the huge bodies of research that are out there. And 5 years ago, when we were saying, hey, they switched the methadone formulation, like we were talking about earlier, nobody believed us. No one believed there was a problem. But he said, oh yeah, let's find out. Let's investigate. Let's do a study. Let's ask questions. And he did, and published papers, and we were able to present those papers to government. And he and I and other people went all together as a delegation so that they couldn't just be like, oh, you're a bunch of junkies, get out. It's like a respectable civilian was there too, and so I really learned a lot from him, and he encouraged me. He opened the door. He said, you should do this, so I owe him a lot of gratitude for helping me figure this out, for sure. But I didn't even know some of the things that they found out through research were so intuitive to me. Like for example, diverting pharmaceutical prescriptions is always supposed to be bad, right? You hide it, you don't talk about it, but everybody will buy a little bit of the prescriptions from each other and stuff. And actually, research has found that's a great way that people reduce harm and assist each other in mutual aid and this sort of thing. It's not just this evil thing. And so I felt less shameful about that. I got on methadone that way. A lot of people do. And I learned that through research that Ryan showed me, and it just blew my mind. Sometimes the power of academia, even in your own life,
Do you ever work with Megan Thumat? She's a street nurse. Yeah, I know her. You're in the realm of all those Trudeau scholars. Did you go to their 2017 drug conference in Ottawa?
No, I didn't. But Megan, when I was telling the story of writing this policy half an hour ago, just that we have in BC, Megan was one of the people who invited me to the table. So I just like big shout out to her too, like for thinking of that.
Yeah. Well, say hi to Megan for me if you see her.
I sure will.
Yeah.
Are you a Trudeau scholar?
Yes, I am. I try not to say that west of Winnipeg because I get dirty looks, but like it's not the younger Trudeau, it's the older Trudeau, and it's a foundation. It has nothing to do with politics. So
no, I know it's a big deal. It's like congratulations, they could rename it, but it's like that's amazing.
Yeah, I told you about my connection with the Trudeau Foundation, eh?
Yeah.
Jesse, yeah. I just did a talk for them last year, I think, about language and culture, and they were really receptive. It was awesome.
Wow, they're obviously funding some really good work and some really good people.
I think Callison's on the board. Is she of the Trudeau Foundation? Do you know her?
Who is that?
Candace Callison.
I do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's from UBC. That's my only connection to the Trudeau Foundation. My friend worked there. Here we go. And now you find folks.
You'll probably be a fellow next year. Yeah.
It's like the homies chat pod of the Trudeau Foundation.
Right. Yeah, that's so weird.
It's a small place.
Oh my gosh.
Well, I want to thank everybody for coming and hanging out with Garth and Tanya and Jesse and I. I want to especially thank Garth Mullins for coming and sharing his story and sharing what he's been working on, which is extremely important. And I'm a huge fan of your podcast, and I've been wanting to sit down and chat with you for a long time. And this has been so much fun. Tanya, thank you so much for jumping in and hanging out. This is awesome. So much fun.
Thanks for letting Auntie crash the table, right?
Well, hopefully we can do this more. Yeah,
you guys, I can't. I'm so like honored that you would think of me as a homie. Like, really, that's fucking awesome. That's great. Thank you for.
No, for real. Like I said, I listen to your podcast often. Like I listen to it like when it comes out. Like I get my notifications, and it's something that I again, it's a storytelling and perspective, and the way that it's put together, it's such a brilliant, beautiful, important piece of work. And bravo on all the recognition that you've been getting, and you deserve more.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks. I will pass on your comments to everybody in the team, and they would be so stoked to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I ask one technical question, Garth?
Sure.
Please ask everything.
What kind of software are you using? Are you using a Mac for your Electro Voice 20 there? Like, how are you processing?
Okay, shall we go on a little tour? Let me take you on a little tour. So yes, we're using a Mac, but we're also using the, I usually use this universal audio thing right here. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Using this old
big button.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Sounds really good. This thing is a old USB mixer. It's worth about $200 or something like that. So it's like it does the job, and yeah, yeah. There's one little trick that you should know. There's I don't know if you can see this. This thing here is it's called a cloud lifter. It's like a preamp for the mic to give it that extra juice.
Yes, we have that. We don't have the other stuff, so we're trying to get all this stuff together because your podcast sounds so crisp. I love it. So now we know we have the technology.
Thank you. Yeah, you got the RE20, the Electro Voice RE20 here. That's your key ingredient.
Yeah, yeah.
What was your preamp? Like, what do you have that connected to? Other than that cloud thing, you have it plugged into a few things. Because I'll get that.
Okay, so you can just get like you don't need to go nuts. You can just get like any USB mixer, and you don't need a million things like I have. Like you can just like a few $100 can do it, you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you.
But so if we're talking technical, I got to loop back to something we were talking about before you turn on the camera. If we have time, Ian, you went to the Moog
We have
factory.
all the time.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Went to the Moog factory in North Carolina, and that is like, for people who don't know, Moog is the like original patch analog keyboard synth sound of like Devo and all those bands, and you'll hear that stuff in the score of our podcast. But wow, what was that like? How did you get there?
We played a festival in North Carolina. I actually believe it was in Charleston, North Carolina. This was before all that horrible stuff that happened there, the Unite the Right rally. But it was it was some really cool like hippie festival, I think. And we got invited because it's like a small town in North Carolina. Like it's not this like major city. The biggest thing is like the Moog factory in the town, basically. And but it's not very big. There was maybe like 30 people working there, each on their own like little component. Like they all had their own like little workspace that was like a specific component, and they're like, yeah, I work on that specific component in this, and this. And then they everyone was super dope. Everyone they showed us everything. We got to like try all kinds of different instruments that didn't even like come out yet. Like, it was really cool. It was fun.
Well, that's the other equipment you need, is anything from there. Like making score and music for your stuff is, well, you're already there.
It's so warm, eh? It's so warm that Moog, you can't get that sound from anything else. Their plugins are decent too if you're making like production on computers.
Yeah. I got one. That Universal Audio has a Moog interface that I'm using, and like I'm all about that. Like, this is the tube powered guitar rig here.
Oh, sick!
Nice.
So it's like I built this pedal board here during the quarantine. So I just, we love the old analog stuff a lot. And were we talking about this earlier, that you're a drummer for the Ripcords from Montreal? And I was trying to figure out in the time between whether we played a same gig, because I was in a band that opened for them one time.
Yeah, I feel like that was earlier. I don't think the Ripcords played Porter Hall, because Porter Hall didn't start throwing shows, like they stopped throwing shows after a while. And I feel like it was
because of that show.
Oh, maybe. Do you remember who else was there? Like was Sick of It All there?
I honestly, it was so long ago, I can't remember. Yeah,
because I'm trying to remember all the times that I saw Ripcords play at Porter Hall. But I joined them later. It was like in the early 2000s. I think I was 20, so I'll say like 2001. And I got to tour Canada with them. I got to play when we played Calgary and Alberta, or Calgary and Edmonton on the way back. It was with like the new Misfits. Or this must have been in like 2002.
I saw the Misfits on that tour.
So did you see them? We didn't play with them in Vancouver. It was only Edmonton.
I saw them in Vancouver. Oh yeah.
Okay, sick. But it was with Marky Ramone on drums, Des Cadena on guitar, and do you remember that? That was bananas. Yeah, was but yeah, I got to meet them because we got to hang out like backstage once. Des was super chill. He was just cool and hanging out with us. I think he had like his eye on a girl that was with one of the guys. Anyways, Jerry Only, he was so professional. Jerry Only from the Misfits. Also, he's bald. I don't know if you know that. And he pulls all his devil lock is like all hair from back here. Oh. And and he's like super professional. Like all he kept talking about was like business stuff. Like it was like great venue. Hey, the numbers are gonna be great tonight. And like I don't know. It was always about like business every time I kind of chatted with him. But Marky Ramone, I'm a huge Ramones fan. And Marky Ramone was the one that I wanted to meet. And he didn't even do sound check, I don't think. Just Des and Jerry. And the show was over. We did our 2 shows, and we were walking back to the van, and I see their little RV. Like, it's not even a bus. Like, they were just kind of using an RV. And I was like, yo, I know Marky's in there, and this is the only chance that I'll ever get to get him to
go for it. Yeah,
I gotta go for it. So I show up and I knock on the thing, and he opens the door. Dude's in his underwear, and he's got his T-shirt that says "The Man, the Legend," and he's like, "Come on in." And he's got like that thick Ramones New York accent, so it was always like, "Hey, great venue, huh? What a great venue!" And he kept like talking like it was so bizarre. But I got him to sign this thing, like it was a poster that said like Misfits with the Ripcords, and I got all their signatures. Yeah. And that was the biggest rock star thing I did until a Tribe Called Red.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun.
That's cool.
Hey Garth, I have a question. Which day does your podcast get released?
We were doing the last Wednesday of every month, and then we declared an emergency on the show because everyone was declaring emergencies about 2 months ago. And so now we're sort of putting it out as necessary. So we kind of did one that was an introduction to the crisis, like what does it mean for people who use drugs? Then a next one about that policy, that step towards safe supply we were talking about. We're just about to put one out, which is sort of like in memoriam of our friend Dave, and then we're also working on one about the Oppenheimer Park Tent City. So when does it come out? We don't have a day right now, and all I can say is the days of the week don't matter for so many people right now that we're just hoping that people don't notice. So
it's true.
Yeah,
that's brilliant.
But thank you for asking, and we're going to at some point go return to our more predictable production schedule, and our podcasts right now are a little more reporterly, and we usually do these kind of a little bit more artsy storytelling kind of radio documentary things. So we've just been mixing it up a little bit right now for the changed times. It seems like I don't know. I want to kind of hear something different. Like my podcast listening has changed since the crisis, COVID crisis started, and I think a lot of people's have. So we're just trying to figure out what is the right kind of radio to make right now. Still figuring it out, I think.
Yeah, it really is. I think so.
Are you finding it hard to be creative right now, Garth?
Yeah, I mean, it comes in fits and starts, but I think a lot of my creativity is probably just stolen from the outside world. Like I see shit that goes on and people talk to me and I'm like, wow, that makes me think something. And then I go do it. And so when I'm not there as much, maybe it's like you kind of get a little bit less of that. I don't know. I hate to be left alone with my own thoughts. I've worked very hard never to be. And so it is a struggle. Yeah, it's challenging. What about you?
Yes. Yes, I'm having a very hard time being creative. I'm having a very hard time even keeping my mind straight to read longer than like a tweet. Anything longer than like tweet form, I feel like is a lot to read right now, which is really frustrating because there's so much that I want to read and try to keep up on. So it's yes, I'm having a very hard time being creative, and it's hard when I'm in the midst of writing a novel too. So it's
wow,
not a good time. Yeah, a YA novel. Yeah, based on like what I've been learning about my history, and I guess the elevator pitch would be the native Harry Potter.
Wow,
awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I was going to do that. So you did that. Good for you.
Oh yeah. Well, I learned.
Great.
I was reading the Jesuit history of like the Nipissing, which is my people specifically, and the Jesuits described us as sorcerers, and we were sorcerers that were so powerful, and we'd use juggling and acrobats as part of our conjuring the spirits, and we were so powerful at conjuring spirits that we were able to resurrect the dead. And I was like, I want that back. So, yeah, I'm trying to figure that out.
Yeah, I actually found that Jesse's book helped me get unstuck. I was stuck on reading too, like I couldn't make it through stuff. And then I got the audio version of your book, Jesse, and that was like that just flew by. I was like, oh, I'm cured. I can read books again, and it seemed like it worked. And now I'm like reading Camus, The Plague, and stuff like that. So,
nice.
and Shock Doctrine by Naomi Klein and that kind of like appropriate stuff. But I was stuck. I really was having the same thing. Like longer than a tweet, I couldn't focus. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. I didn't mean to.
But like there were moments where you were reading and I had it in my earbuds, like you talked about this party where there was this girl you met who brought blueberry muffins to this crazy drug-fueled cocaine party. And I was just like, oh man, I remember this weird girl who would show up and bake bread at these total chaos, like house wrecking parties that I was at. And she would show up. She was from Victoria, and she would show up with her own ingredients and like go into a kitchen that was half destroyed and bake bread. And that was just her thing, And I was like, wow. Yeah. Anyway, I kept finding these little weird, discrete little parallels. And also it's just such a good book, like I couldn't stop listening to it.
I bet that bread was really good though too, right?
So good, yes. And now everyone's doing it.
Yeah. It's true. It's true. Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time. We already did an hour and a half or over an hour and a half. Yeah, this was awesome. I love doing this because like it actually like gives me the sensation of dinners with friends and actual like dinner conversation, and even like
Oh,
the talking over each other and interrupting, like it's part of it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Pass the gravy, man. Pass the gravy. All right.
exactly. Well, Garth, would you come back
Oh,
and join us again sometime?
anytime.
Brilliant.
I'd love for us all to do this, like all in the same location one day or something. But this has been great. I totally like it. You know.
Yeah, we will do that. I promise. One day we'll go and we'll eat in Vancouver. We all got to go out that way.
Excellent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for everybody who's been listening and stuck with it. You know, like I know there were some people texting me about how do I listen before, and so yeah, thanks to you guys for having me, and thanks to people for hanging out and hearing us.
Thanks.
Our pleasure, man.
Yeah.
For real, you're awesome. Tanya, thanks for coming to hang out also, and you're going to be popping up lots, of course.
Here at Avanti, she's always hanging around. I know.
It's true. It's perfect. Jesse, bro, always fun hanging out with you, bro.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for listening. Apchi miigwaj pisindawak. And bamapi until next time.
Thanks.
Bamapi.